We're live. Hey, folks, thanks for tuning in to the
Walt
BAMF
immediately
podcast.
walks away.
Yeah, that's how it goes. That is Walt Rebelliard, our co-host, sitting down there. I'm your host, Mike Lafferty. Today, we have the vaguely defined theme of high fantasy versus low fantasy. So Tolkien versus Game of Thrones. What would you guys call low fantasy?
Conan, I think.
Conan. Yeah.
Definitely.
And those two bearded fellows below me in the Brady Bunch grid, there is Apocalyptic Chuck, also known as Chuck Rice, looking very grandfatherly today. Chuck, how you doing?
Well, that's quite the introduction. Thank you.
RPG legend Chuck Rice, who you may know.
I'm fucking grandfatherly, apparently.
Grandfathers who feel the same way. You may know Chuck Rice from such hits as the Blood and series, and he was nominated for an Emmy for the Blood and Fists.
And After Zombies.
After Zombies.
That is a meaty tome, sir. But that John Gibbons artwork is just crushing it.
Yeah.
The best bang for your buck in zombie killing RPGs to this day. So thanks for joining us, Chuck.
Thanks.
And also joining us is Mr. Jaime Castle. And Jamie, I understand you're a celebrated author of the fantasy genre. Can you give our viewers and listeners a brief rundown of where they might find your stuff?
I like that Chuck got grandfatherly and I got celebrated. I could go home right now.
Yeah.
Have no regrets. No regrets.
Well, Jamie, I was debating between celebrated and engaging in Richard Marchenko cosplay. I went with celebrated.
I'm gonna celebrate. I'm gonna go with celebrated. Celebrated's good. I am 6 books into the Buried Goddess Saga. I co-write it with Rhett C. Bruno, who's a good friend of mine, and we are I don't know, about 3/4 of the way through book 6, and that'll be releasing in February, and then we will be calling it temporarily or permanently quit on this series. We're not really sure exactly yet, but I mean, the series will be done with 6 books. So just not sure what direction we're going in after that.
Well, RPGs is where the real money is.
Yeah, something like that.
Don't say that.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, if you actually Google Buried Goddess Saga, the very first link that comes up is to Amazon, to the 5-book series. So.
Mm-hmm. And Web of Eyes being the first one. So if you're looking for a book to pick up, check it out.
Wow. Oh, that first one is free on Kindle Unlimited or 99 cents. Wow. God, I know that's what we're talking about publishing, but goddamn, these are some affordable ebooks you got here, Jamie.
So there's an unfortunate situation that Amazon kind of puts you in when you're publishing books. Kindle Unlimited, I'll keep this real brief, but Kindle Unlimited is really where the money's at for authors. Mm-hmm. You get paid per page read. And so really the goal is to get as high in the rankings as you can, which means being forced to sell your book 1 at 99 cents. Mm-hmm. We don't care about getting paid for our book sales as much as we care about Kindle Unlimited readers actually reading our books.
So Kindle cuts you a check every quarter or whatever for a number of page views.
Basically, yeah.
That is news to me. That is interesting.
We make more of our money in audio. Audio is kind of where we're audio guys. So the Audible world is where we live.
Right on.
We need to have you back to talk publishing at some point because this is some interesting shit. I didn't realize. I thought audio was just an afterthought after print. I didn't realize.
Oh man,
no, you had no idea.
Audio's gold right now, man. Gold.
I did not know that. That's crazy. Chuck, did you know that?
No.
No.
So, Jamie, could you give us the elevator pitch for the Buried Goddess Saga and like how you kind of got into it? Because you started in RPGs and stuff like that with like D&D and stuff, didn't you?
So I wasn't gonna do this. I'm gonna do this anyway. I told Walt I wasn't gonna do it. Right. So I'm also Steve Bollier, who is the co-owner of Aethon Books, publisher. And yeah, we're working on some RPGs right now. I'm sure Chuck could probably teach me all kinds of lessons, but we're doing some cool stuff with some tabletops. And the elevator pitch for Buried Goddess Saga, I haven't had to do this since book 1. So, the concept is basically that there's a thief and a knight. It's a buddy cop fantasy. Thief and a knight, they don't belong together. It's Lethal Weapon. It's, I don't know, whatever. What's that?
Farfred and the Grey Mouser?
Yeah, man, they just shouldn't be together, and they save the world. There's your elevator pitch.
Okay.
It's not good, but it works.
That's the motto of my own business.
Correct.
It's not good,
I
but
told
it's
the same. My wife says that about me, so we're good. It's not good, but it works.
Oh my god. Thank God for Captain America mugs.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, like, how did you get into fantasy? Like, were you a Conan fan in the beginning? Did you gravitate towards stuff like Lord of the Rings?
I was an R.A. Salvatore fan throughout my life. I've read 42 of the 42 books I think that he's released, and I started writing my first fantasy when I was like 14 years old. And of course, I've tried 700 times since then. And I've got literally hundreds of thousands of words that have never been published. And then I started writing space opera sometime in 2016, 2017. And Rhett Bruno and I kind of hooked up and started writing together. And long story short is I wanted to get back to writing fantasy. At least I wanted to accomplish that goal. And so I started writing Web of Eyes, and very shortly into it, just a few thousand words into it, I said, "Hey, Rhett, do you want to write this with me?" Because he and I were writing some sci-fi together at the time. And we decided to, and then lo and behold, 2 years later, we've got the 6 books and about 4 more in the sci-fi market that are not released yet. So it's been a productive 2 years, to say the least. But that's how I got into fantasy. I love R.A. Salvatore, love Dungeons and Dragons. I'm a D&D player, and so it was just it had to happen. It was inevitable.
Right on.
Oh, cool. Chuck, same question to you.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
We're trying not to go with this grandfather thing.
What did you say, Sonny?
Oh my god.
You want the elevator pitch for Solstice? Is that what we're asking here?
Yeah.
Of all the genres out there, why fantasy? And then you can go into Solstice.
Of all the genres, why fantasy?
Well, because you dabble in superhero, you dabble in post-apocalyptic, obviously with After Zombies, you dabble in sci-fi with some of the other properties. So all those are things you decide to focus your attention now onto a low fantasy D&D setting for City of Solstice. And what appeals to you about that genre? And then
it was just what I was in the mood for at that time. Like I had just kind of gotten done with I guess you'd call it a very high magic fantasy campaign, and set in the world of Greyhawk. And I was thinking I was still in the mood for fantasy, but I wanted to do something different. And so I started, percolating this idea about kind of a fantasy police state. The players are the cops, but the town is run by the criminals. And so what is that like? And I wanted to do low magic. And so then I started thinking about how that would work. And I decided, well, we'll make it like Hideyoshi's Sword Hunt, which is a reference I'm sure literally tens of people got. So when Hideyoshi took over Japan, the first thing he did was disarm everybody. So I wanted to do that with magic. And so it's actually a high magic world, but the laws in the city to keep the corrupt individuals in power, they don't want anyone using magic. So I don't know. It was just kind of an organic process, I guess. It was a bunch of ideas that I liked, and they all kind of worked together.
All right. I got to admit, my Japanese history is a bit rusty, but the Sword Hunt was a historical thing. This is a thing that actually happened.
Correct.
Okay, I got the Wikipedia page here because
What's it say about AR-15s on there?
The peasants would have loved the fuck out of them. I think that's
yes, they would have. Because basically after this, the only one who were really armed were the militant class.
Yeah. Hideyoshi went and Nobunaga unifies Japan. Hideyoshi cacks him because he wanted to rule Japan. And then the first thing he did was disarm as many people as possible.
That would never happen. You're crazy. It would never happen.
Okay, you're officially refusing my book pitch. Okay, I got it. I'll try better next time.
But yeah, so I really liked the original line that you had, which was the Untouchables set in a fantasy age.
Yeah,
that was really cool.
Yeah, and again, magic is kind of your alcohol analog here. That's the main thing that they're trying to both divine magic, meaning the gods, and your kind of classic wizard magic are the two things that they're really trying to keep a lid on. And I always love to involve the gods in my campaign. Like, I have the gods physically show up all the time. I don't know, it's just something I like. And so the city of Solstice is actually named after the goddess Solstice, and my players are kind of freaking out because she keeps showing up, and she's like, "This city can't live without me." In part because I might just blow it up because I'm really annoyed that you can't worship me here. So,
have you ever considered working with some of the more mainstream pantheons in your future work? Like maybe do something set in the Judeo, maybe in the Old Testament. Just have Jehovah show up occasionally and be like, "Y'all fucking up." I'm gonna smite a motherfucker. It's all right. It's the seltzer water talking.
I don't think I could top the source material on that, honestly.
It does happen kind of a lot, right? Cities turn to salt, etc. So yeah, fair enough.
So do you guys have a favorite high versus low fantasy? Because obviously we've all loved Conan and stories like that, and we all kind of groove on stuff like Tolkien and especially R.A. Salvatore, because you can't swing a scimitar without hitting a Dris Duerden joke. But I mean, do you guys have a preference, one versus the other? And if so, why do you like that preference?
I just love that you got Dris Duerden correct, but that said R.A. Salvatore. What world are we living in where it's R.A. Salvatore, Walt?
Sorry, my Italian is showing. Mi dispiace, signore.
Put some mozzarella on it. You got to put some parmigiana. Yeah, I go there. That's my favorite. R.A. Salvatore's, his entire, the Forgotten Realms universe is absolutely where it's at for me as far as fantasy goes. And so it's hard for me to separate anything. Of course, I play in that world, right? Like, I mean, what's better than reading about all the places that you play in, Waterdeep and Menzo Baranzan and like all of these Faerun and all of these places. Like, as a player, I read the book and I go, "Oh, I've been there." Like, how could you not be excited about that? So, I mean, that's my stance, at least.
Right on, Chuck.
I'm a Conan guy. I think Robert E. Howard is one of the great underappreciated writers of the 20th century. It doesn't get any better than Tower of the Elephant for me. Conan's in Zamora, the city of thieves. He's in a bar. He's drunk off his ass. He's never been a thief before. And a guy dares him to go rob a wizard's tower. And he just kind of drunkenly walks out into the night. It's like, yeah, I could fucking do that. And it's great. It's gritty. It's fun. And he's actually a really good wordsmith, in my opinion.
It's funny. The first book, the Web of Eyes, the first book in my series, starts out in a similar fashion. The main character, Whitney Firestone, is self-proclaimed world greatest thief, and he has.
I love it,
and he's not. I mean, the guy lucks his way through life, and
which is the greatest tagline ever.
I purposely put him in a tavern in his own farm town. I purposely did the trope. And he is challenged by a dwarf to steal the glass crown off the king's head. And his whole attitude is like, I've done everything else. Like, why not try this? And that's the kickoff for the whole series, where he pretty much accidentally steals the crown. He's got no plan, and it falls into his lap. And from that point on, he's now hooked up with the wearer of white, which is the head knight of the entire world. And he needs a thief to accomplish a task, and the quote world's greatest thief is in his dungeon. He goes, "You're either going to die or come with me." And so I love that. I mean, I have not read a whole lot of Arthur's stuff, and so to hear that kind of a thing is there, hey, that's wonderful. Hey, Crystal Shard, the greatest book ever written. I love it.
Crystal Shard was a really fun book.
Yeah, it was
really fun book. And that second book, the last third of that second book, I was just crushed. I think I read that. I was 14, 15 when I read that, and I was devastated at the ending of that book.
Yeah, it's about the time I read it too, when I was about that age.
Right on.
If we're high-low fantasy, I mean, I have to put Harry Potter in this. I just have to. I know maybe it's childish, but it's not to me. I think it's some of the greatest high fantasy ever told.
I just read a really interesting article this weekend about I only read the first book, and I was like, hey, this is great. I'm not going to read 7 more, and I stopped. But well, I believe in enjoying things the exact amount that you want to, and I'm like, I dig this, and now I'm done. But someone was just the movies always felt to me like maybe they were leaving a lot of stuff out, and it seemed like they were switching some characterizations around, and there was a long list from a guy who really loved the Harry Potter books about all the things that got wrong in the movies. And I was like, oh, okay, they did give a lot of Ron's qualities to Hermione, didn't they? That makes sense. But hey, you guys remember Gord the Thief from back in the day?
Mm-mm.
Yeah. No. Gary Gygax wrote those books.
Yeah, Gord the Rogue. Sorry, was that stuff set in Forgotten Realms, or was that somewhere else?
No, it's Greyhawk.
Greyhawk, okay.
Of course, he set it in the world of Greyhawk.
Would you say that starts as low fantasy and moves to high fantasy as he progresses?
It's been a long time, but yeah, I think he starts out as just a thief, but then in the end, there's like a bunch of god bullshit going on.
Yeah, I mean, he basically becomes a deity over the course of the book. So
yeah.
Okay, I guess that's a nice example for our conversation.
Yeah.
Okay.
So how do you work these tropes effectively into an RPG, like a tabletop game? I mean, you have all these, you have gods, goddesses, magic, this, that. I mean, there's so much that goes into fantasy, and that can make or break a fantasy. I mean, because like, look at the Dungeons and Dragons movies. Those. Some people herald those as like, yes, exactly. Herald those as like, the greatest spoof on a property ever, and some people really, really like them. But then you look at something like Game of Thrones, which starts off very low magic, and then has some like elements of mystical creatures in it. How do you bring all that to a tabletop game without breaking the table, or without breaking your players and having them roll their eyes and turn it into Monty Python?
Well, I mean, for me, I let the players kind of decide where it's going to go. I have had the same group for over 20 years, and so I kind of know what elements that they're interested in. If it's a new group, you just have to be kind of laser focused on what interests them. I mean, you can tell, like, you'll say something and one player will roll his eyes and start looking at his phone, and one player will lean in and he's like, no, give me more of that. And so you just kind of keep adjusting the knobs until you have the right mix for all your players. Yeah.
No, Mike. The 15-year-old comes out.
Sorry.
Jamie, how about you?
As far I would assume we're going novels, just because I haven't done that in the tabletop world. My series is very much low fantasy to high fantasy. Like I said, it starts out as a buddy cop, very sword and sorcery, but like very limited magic. Magic has been outlawed, basically, and I think that's a fair trope that we find in a lot of stuff. By the end of the series, like Chuck was saying about his desires, like all of my gods come to life. That was not the plan when I started it out, but Rhett at one point around book 4, he's like, dude, we named it the Buried Goddess Saga, and you're not expecting these gods to actually like be tangible manifestations. And I'm like, well, no, I mean, that the goal for me was to create the characters who have their focus on the gods. But then he's like, no, the gods need to be a huge part of this. And so by the end of the book, the entire war is literally the gods on the earth. Well, on Pantego is really what it is. But yeah, it started out like you question whether or not there really even is magic. Is there even any gods? Are they all just myths and legends? And then over the course of 6 books, you go, crap, this turned into a pretty damn big epic fantasy. So that's how we handled it. Low to high, and on purpose, because you get the characterization, I think, in the low fantasy more than you get in the high fantasy. High fantasy, like Brandon Sanderson type stuff, in my opinion, focuses so much around the magic system that you lose the characters. And I'm a character guy. I love characters. I don't really care about a magic system nearly as much as I care about great characters that might use that magic system.
Now, you said that the plan morphed into bringing the gods into the series. What was the original plan?
No, there wasn't none. I write. There's no friggin' plan. There's never a plan. I literally listen. The series started with me going, Web of Eyes. That's a really badass name. How can I write a story that goes along with it? I literally liked the name Web of Eyes, and then Buried Goddess Saga. I thought that's really kind of cool too. And everything developed from names. I'm just a name person. And then after talking with Rhett for 10 hours during a brainstorming session, we had book 1 done. and like the plan for book 2 that we had totally got scrapped when we actually got to book 2. And at some point we just went, let's just surprise ourselves as much as we surprise the readers. And by book 6, I mean, we have about 50,000 words left, and we're on the phone daily with one another going, what are we doing? And by the end of the conversation, we're like, oh, I love that. That's going to be perfect. We have this very vague goal of what we want to happen with our characters. We don't really care how it has to happen as long as it's believable within the world and entertaining to the readers. So
how much of as a percentage would you say during the writing process do you hate the book you're writing?
Man,
this is some real fucking writer talk right here.
This might peg me as, I don't know, an egomaniac. I usually love what I'm writing. Otherwise I wouldn't be writing. I've written a lot of stuff that I hated and I threw that out.
Okay.
As I'm writing the Buried Goddess Saga, like these characters have just become like literally family members. We just got a brand new puppy last night that we named after one of our main characters. My wife kind of went, her name it's Sora. And she's like, that would be great. And I'm like, oh, we have now immortalized one of my characters in dog form. And so well, that's great. Why not? So, but dude, I hate a lot of stuff that I write. I just don't continue with it. If I hate it, I just go, I could write more words.
How about you, Chuck?
Well, I reach a point. I never hate the book itself, but RPGs are kind of like building a chair, right? There's a lot of functions built in. It's not pure art where you can do anything. There are things that it needs, and the book still needs it whether or not you want to write it or not. And so that process can sometimes suck.
Yeah, I've heard it compared closer to technical writing. I think that's probably some truth in that.
A lot of people hate it when I say this, but I do not think writing an RPG, I would not classify it as an art. I would classify it as a craft. There's art in it, but there are just things it needs. It's again my chair analogy. A one-legged chair might be beautiful, but no one will want it.
There's a lot of engineering involved in the process. Where in writing, like we had a really unique benefit. We released book 1 in like February of 2018. And then within a month, Audible Studios contacted us and wanted to buy the series. So that's our audio situation. And so what we ended up doing was taking book 1 off the market, and continuing to write while we waited for the audio process to happen. So by the time the book 1 came out, book 3 was done being written. So like anything that we ended up doing in book 3 that didn't quite work with book 1, we just went back into book 1, and we were able to use like 400,000 words to create the world that we wanted before anyone really even read any of it. So a lot of writers don't have that kind of a benefit where they just like they write book 1, and by book 4 they're like, well, I'm stuck doing what I did in book 1, even if it's not the best thing that could be for this series.
Yeah. And then Winds of Winter was never finished.
Did you guys see the joke Stephen King Winds of Winter Afternoon?
That was pretty good.
Oh yeah.
Hell yeah. Now, did you guys? A lot of us keyed in the other day on FaceSpace when a bunch of RPG nerds basically broke it in half. Did you guys see the thing about the Starfinder game going on Alexa?
Oh yeah.
And basically reigniting people's love for choose your own adventure books.
Yeah, we actually did a podcast about that. We had James Sutter, the author, on this very podcast, talking to a friend of the podcast, Jason Tondro, who now works at Paizo.
And do you think you would see? Oh, I'm sorry, Mike. Go ahead.
Just saying, we were deep in that story.
We were there when it broke. No, the references, Mike. Do you guys see a place for something like that, like an audio style choose your own adventure through a computerized interface like that for fantasy? Do you see something like that coming back?
I mean, why not?
Yeah,
right?
go ahead,
It seems like certain genres have gotten there first. Steam has a whole category for what they call visual novels, which is it's basically choose your own adventure, right? But they're mostly hentai bullshit. So I mean, why not bring that to a real genre?
Alexa has, I think you might have sort of just said this, but Alexa has a children's choose your own adventure thing that I've sat with my son and attempted to do. You basically say, Alexa, take me on an adventure or something like that. And there's like 2 or 3 stories, at least at the time I was doing it, there were like 2 or 3 stories. And when you get to a certain point, the Alexa will say, would you like to do this, this, or this? And it's literally just, I want to do this. And then it takes the story in that direction, and it's very limited in its interaction. I know Netflix did that, right? So there was at least in kid genres, that Netflix had a few of them.
They did. There was a Black Mirror episode.
Yep, and there was like a Steve Irwin type show. Of course, I don't remember what it was called, but there was a guy like a Steve Irwin type who was out in the wilderness, and he's like, "Would you like me to eat these raw frog eggs or continue on?"
Oh, that was of course Bear Grylls, I think.
Was it? I don't remember if it was, but you're probably right. And so I've seen it happen. I can't imagine it happening in Audible, at least anytime soon. I don't think there's enough of a listener base for stuff like that for anybody to want to take the effort to do it.
I think it's all about I don't know. I work in IT, so I have to deal with machine learning a little bit, and there's this wide gulf between like the IBM commercials about what Watson can do and what that shit can actually do in real, when you set it up in your environment. And it's it's all in the implementation, and it's not as smart as I want you to think it is. But I mean, having said that,
I'm sorry, are you saying technology companies exaggerate the capabilities of their devices? I refuse to believe this.
So no, it's I think you could do it and make it fun. I mean, otherwise it's just like 3D movies. Everyone's excited for a few years and it goes away. But yeah, Black Mirror, it was Bandersnatch was the name of the episode.
Yeah.
And, they had a gimmick in that where your character became slowly aware of the fact that you were controlling him as the story went on.
That sounds like a nightmare.
Yeah, well, it's basically Twilight Zone kind of vibe. So
and it's also vaguely the Ryan Reynolds upcoming movie where he's in the video game.
It's a very similar idea. Yeah.
Yeah, I love seeing. I'm not a lit RPG fan. I don't know if you're familiar with the lit RPG genre, but as the publisher, I'm a fan of it because it sells like crazy. So for me, anytime I see lit RPG in the theaters, I'm excited by it. Jumanji was a very small take on that.
Is lit RPG specifically when you've got people pulled into an RPG?
Not specifically that, or not exclusively that is what I should say. But that's the concept. Is everything from Ready Player One. Ready Player One would be like low lit RPG if you want to look at it that way. It's called like game lit. And then something like Ryan Reynolds' new movie Free Man would be like straight up lit RPG. He is an NPC in a video game, and he discovers that he is an NPC. And the concept is beautiful. It's an amazingly cool concept for a gamer to want to read a book about a guy stuck in a game. The execution of it, for me at least, the execution of it has generally been fairly poor so far because it's a brand new genre. And there's not a ton of listen, there are really good writers. So listen, lit RPG writers, I'm not making fun of you. But there are so many gamers who have never written anything trying to write in that genre that it's not yet gotten to the literary place that it needs to be.
It's like Harry Potter, Rock.
Yeah.
The Harry Potter lore.
Harry Potter and the Rockers, man.
Yeah, but the Rock is where it all breaks down.
Yeah.
Dear Lord, that's scary. I pray nothing. Oh no. Oh yeah, that's the Ryan Reynolds trailer.
It's beautiful, man. It's a great idea.
Yeah.
The so there's.
Can you guys hear that?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Chuck, you seen this yet?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Has everyone seen this? I'm just excited because I can share audio. I figured that out 2 days ago. So.
What was that? Hyping the merits of technology.
This is actually working, but well,
it's a cool trailer too. I mean, it's great.
I just,
whenever I see Ryan Reynolds, I'm always like, why is he not in another Daredevil movie? Sorry, not Daredevil. What the
Green Lantern, man.
Green Lantern.
Wow.
Yeah.
Don't have a good day.
All right,
I thought you meant Deadpool. So
I meant Deadpool. Sorry.
Yeah.
All right, we can kill that. Sorry about that.
I'm excited about the technology. Transitioning away from like the lit RPG side, how much of like actual medieval culture and medieval like I don't want to say physics because that's really the wrong word. I mean, you basically stub your toe and then you get like gangrene that rots your foot off. Because hygiene and everything back then was just all over the map. How much of that kind of makes it into your stories, or does it? I mean, is it straight up action adventure, or is it, oh crap, I bruised my elbow on this rock. I could get an infection and die now.
You've died of dysentery, right? I mean, that's
what's the name of that game? It was a
Oregon Trail. Oregon Trail. I mean, I think. Go ahead, Chuck. I'll let you go first, man.
I'm actually Mike. Chuck's down below. Chuck, go ahead.
Oh, I thought Chuck was talking. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, in D&D, it's interesting because D&D actually has better medical care than us if you have access to a cleric at the right level. D&D, people can bring you back from the dead. You can regenerate lost limbs, right? So D&D becomes this weird, almost like metaphor for 21st century healthcare. If you can afford it, healthcare is amazing. And then you've got the guy working on the farm who has 2 fingers because he doesn't know anybody who can cast regenerate, right?
Yeah. I think that for me in our books, part of reading fantasy is to escape the realities of life. And so the last thing I want to do is subject my readers to, 6 chapters of a character unable to walk because he like tore his ACL or something. I mean, when we get down to it, like, these guys should be really fricked up from the things that they do, jumping off of cliffs, doing this, doing that. You watch anything on the CW network, I think specifically of the show The 100, and the number of times somebody should be absolutely dead on those shows from doing nonsense. As a writer, I sit there and I go, I can't even suspend disbelief on this. It's like the distance you just fell off of that cliff would kill anyone in a heartbeat. And then, 4 scenes later, they're up and at him and, killing the big baddie. And it's like, what? So I think we have to kill that stuff if we're going to entertain people.
Well, George Martin didn't really, though, did he? I mean, that was kind of how Game of Thrones was different than everything else. Because Wayback Machine, Song of Ice and Fire started what, mid-90s?
Yeah, it was, yes. A long time ago.
Yeah, I mean, there wasn't a ton of gritty fantasy out there, and he shows up, and it's characters you love are dying in the first book, and horrible things are happening to people for no good reason. Although, yeah, I mean, there isn't really a lot of mundane. Hey, look, there's old Bob with the big tumor on his face. I mean, political.
I mean, the Hound had his disfigurements.
Mm-hmm.
Grimdark wasn't really a thing until Martin made it mainstream, but even if we say that, like, it didn't really become quote mainstream until Game of Thrones the show came out.
Yeah,
Robert Jordan could be considered grimdark if you want to go back to the Wheel of Time and some of the stuff
Wheel
that
of
happened.
Time got dark. Yes.
Yeah, man. God, Harry Potter got dark. I mean, by book 7, people you love were just dead, and you're like, I thought this was a kid's book. What the hell happened? Weasleys are dying. Weasleys are not supposed to die.
Hashtag save the Weasleys.
Yeah, it's sold in the young adult section. Yeah, it's exactly true. So yeah, that is a good point. In terms of like marketability, I mean, in RPGs, Chuck, do you think there's more of a market for low fantasy or high fantasy, or is that not really a meaningful distinction?
I never have any idea of where the market's at, honestly. I write to please myself and my players, and then hopefully other people come along for the ride. The only thing I can really do in terms of, I guess, what you would consider to be market research is, if my players like it, I assume that my players are not 100% special, unique snowflakes, and so I assume that some other players are going to like it too.
Mike, how do you feel about Chuck writing to please himself? Do you enjoy that whole idea of pleasing himself? Do you have anything to add to that at all? Or no?
You can't please everybody. You got to please yourself. That philosophy's got me through mainly a lonely night. And
does it help if I do this?
No.
I'm going to get the explicit tag.
Yep, there it goes, right across the bottom of the screen.
You jokingly said that RPGs are where the money's at, but we have 2 guys that we're working with right now on a fantasy post-apocalyptic RPG, and one of the guys we were working with just finished up a Kickstarter that made over $1 million.
Oh yeah, you can do that. That happens.
So I have been watching these dudes bank. And of course, the problem with Kickstarter, Chuck, you probably know this, the problem with Kickstarter is that you eventually got to fulfill orders. And that's where the hard part comes in. But
there's always those 3 freaking guys in Brazil.
Right? I mean, there's crazy money to be made in all of these places. It's just figuring out how to do it.
Yeah.
Now, can you spoil us a little bit about your impending RPG-ness?
The spoilers would be that I have guys that have worked on Conan and Warhammer 40,000 working with us, and the concept. And can I share screens, or can only Mike share?
No, I think you can share it, and then and then he can put you as the main screen.
Yeah, go
I
for it.
wonder. Let me see if I could share some artwork.
You're not a solo layout. We're just seeing you real big.
Oh, I am so handsome. Look at me.
Look at those covers.
Look at
badass.
them. Let's see. I could do the cover, I guess. So here's. Oh, can I share? How do I do this?
Bottom
Right
of
at,
the screen.
right at the bottom of the
You should have a
image.
share screen button.
I guess I got to do this and then do this. So can we see that or no?
Nope, not yet.
Nothing.
Man, nothing. I'm not doing it right, I guess. Try one more time. It's asking me what I want to do. Yeah, I want to do. There we go. Cool. So here's the cover.
Gorgeous.
Oh, that's hot.
So the concept briefly is that we've got these. We've got a necromancer who has basically just raised the dead everywhere. And if you look up in what is my top left-hand corner, you'll see there's like a lighthouse in the background. The basic concept is that there's these lighthouses that are all over the continent, and they emit like this magic from the Elder Stones that keep the dead away. So they're refuge spots throughout the continent. And the goal is to eradicate the dead. So it's
Zombie apocalypse.
zombie apocalypse set in a fantasy world. So
I saw to infinity for 1 second there.
what's that?
He changed the screen.
Oh,
Yeah, that is gorgeous cover. Who's the
Thanks,
artist
man.
on that?
It's a guy named Maxim Costin. Max has done a lot of work for this, and he's actually done this book cover, which you probably can't see because there's a giant glare. But he, let's see if I can. Oh, I don't want to do that. I'm just going to end up destroying my entire office.
Wait, what's the name of the book? I'll see if I can find it online.
It's not out yet, so you probably won't be able to find it. But I can just share it again. It's the Luna Missile Crisis.
I know a lot of Russian FTP sites, man. Give me a chance. Maybe I can dig it out.
That is for a book that's coming out exclusively on Audible Originals that I wrote with Rhett, coming out in February. So potentially I can pull it up, but I don't know where it is because I am not that organized, I guess.
You know, one thing I noticed about the Kickstarters that make like a ton of money. I mean, it always seems like you either spent years building a fan base and cultivating them and getting a large email list for marketing, or you've just got tons of beautiful art to splash up there.
Art's big. The other concept is obviously knowing people in the industry that can help share. And so we've been building this Kickstarter now for a long freaking time, and we're waiting for the right time when we've got all our ducks in a row to actually do something about it.
Christmas time is probably, December 24th, I think is when you should launch.
Yeah, probably the best time.
All right. So I'm adding this to the screen. Oh, hey.
Wow.
Cool cover.
So the book, this story is alternate. It's an alternate history of the Cold War, where Yuri Gagarin is launching for the Russians, and at the same moment, these Volbathi aliens jump into orbit around the moon, and Gagarin slams into the Volbathi ship. And so the Volbathi think that Earth is attacking. America thinks that Russia is attacking, and Russia thinks that America is attacking. And there is just a massive nuclear war that happens all at once involving the aliens. And so it's the 1960s as if aliens were involved.
Oh my God, this is. Please tell me when this launches, you'll come back and talk about it.
Yeah, man, February 20th. Rhett and I wrote this book about 3 years ago, and it's literally just been sitting around waiting for, we self-publish and we own a publishing company. We had a plan for this book and we didn't know what it was. And when Audible Originals said we want to do it as an Audible Original production, we went, this is it. This is what we've been waiting for. So that'll be fun, and we're excited about it.
That's fantastic. That cover was tight.
Thanks, man.
There's a lot going on in that cover that just screams like this needs to be read. That's fantastic.
Thanks, man.
Trickling back to fantasy again. As you can see the swords behind me, I've spent probably 30 years chasing some of the best swordsmen on the planet. and learning from people. And one of the things I get all the time when I do talk to people who are either thinking about writing fantasy or people who play like a lot of fantasy RPGs is, you know, they want to know about what swordsmanship is like. And the disappointed look they get, you know, that you get on their face when you were like, you know, swordsmanship is really a 1-to-1 thing. Big battles didn't happen with a lot of swords. They happened with a lot of other things. Does that come out in the fantasy that you guys write about, or do you guys mostly focus on the like Jamie was saying earlier, focus on the character interaction, which would be a lot more personal, close-in weapons?
Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Who's answering?
Seeing as you're talking, you got the stick.
Yeah, go.
We always have some big epic battles, but they are very. We don't have like the let's line up on one side of the field, you line up on the other side of the field, and then go at it. All of the battles that have taken place that I can remember in this series have all been very spontaneous. Whether it's a raid or a misunderstanding amongst people. And so it generally is a bunch of guys who are standing around with swords, and suddenly there's a reason that they're at each other's throats. You know, I have read we've all seen the movies and we've all read the books where there's just like this giant sword fight that happens. And honestly, I've always looked at it and gone, I don't really see how this would have worked. Because in my mind, you've got 100 people with archers back there, and I can't imagine why they can't just wipe out what's running at them, especially when one army is generally not as well armored as they probably could be in the situation that they're in. So I take those things into consideration. If I tell the reader that my guy has what we call glorurium armor, which is this like crazy strong armor, like they're not going to get shot by an arrow, and they're not going to probably die in a sword fight. And it always blows my mind how these things happen in books or movies where like these guys are in tremendously heavy armor and somehow still die. It blows my mind. I don't get it.
How about it, Chuck?
Well, I mean, again, I'm kind of catering to a genre in some ways. So I tend to describe in my RPGs things that players could potentially do, which tends to be like small unit tactics, right? Where you have a mage and a fighter working together. And like that's how the takeover happened in Solstice, if you read the descriptions of it in the book. Because again, it's, you know, these are people, you're thinking ahead to the point that whoever the big bads are in the setting, eventually people are going to fight them the way D&D parties fight bad guys. So
whack at it with my sharp and pointy stick.
Exactly.
So do you guys have any cool weapons that are not standard traditional? Like I really enjoyed, even though I was like, how the hell did that happen? When Game of Thrones brought one of these into the character of Bronn. I mean, to see one of these on screen, I almost wet my pants. I was like, because a kukri is a weird looking knife. You know, yeah. I mean, this is a big blade.
Is that the Pakistani or the Sikh weapon?
It's the Gurkha.
Okay.
Right. So this is a big ass knife. And to see that in a fantasy like George R. Martin's, to see that on screen and implemented the way it was, you know, when I first saw it on the back of the character, I'm like, holy crap, that guy's carrying a kukri. But then he was just kind of swinging it around and not really using it the way he was, the way you should use one of these knives. So it was like almost like a letdown. Do you guys, in contrast to that, do you guys have any cool weapons that really don't appear anywhere else in fantasy?
No. I know that's a terrible answer.
Now, if you mean so I've in real life, I've got my nice longbow. Of course, I don't use it. I keep it strung up. It's just for It's just for looks, but it's like orange acacia wood or something, and it's and then I don't know if does this count as,
does that appear in the book?
Really crazy. No, this does not appear in the book, but this is legit for real and like crazy ridiculous sharp. And my son loves it, but he's only 5, so he doesn't get to play with it as often.
Yeah,
Not as often.
Sharp,
Just
like
every now and then.
Yeah.
So some people have crayon marks down their walls. You have these giant slashes.
In the books, the only weapon that I can think of that was a little unique was we have this pole staff that has a small war hammer on each end.
Almost like a Lutheran hammer.
Kind of like a Lutheran hammer. And, it's another nationality, ethnicity, whatever word we want to use. And so I didn't give it any specific title. As a matter of fact, it's always described from a character who doesn't understand what it is. So it's always just like, it's just a staff with 2 hammers on it. But I thought that was cool. I had never really seen that in any kind of fantasy. And I mean, for me personally, I think that'd be a pretty cool weapon to learn how to wield. Did
you ever think about getting one designed and like actually pulled into the reel?
No. I mean, if you're offering, I can give you my address after.
Right on. I will go get 2 Craftsman hammers and stick that in both ends of a PVC. We can rock the glaive. Dear God.
Yep.
That's going back in the way back. That's some weird fantasy right there. Aliens in a fantasy world.
Yep.
Yeah. What do you guys think of Game of Thrones? The more I think about it, I mean, it's kind of low fantasy all the way through. Well, God, the last season, you've got dragons blowing shit up everywhere.
And you got the Red Brotherhood that's constantly resurrecting people and stuff like that.
And they fight an army of zombies at Winterfell in that battle. So yeah, I guess it seems like that's an arc in a lot of fantasy, right? I mean, it's like in D&D, you start low level, doing more grounded tasks, and then you wind up, fighting armies of the dead and dragons and whatnot.
Well, I think if you're following characters in a story, if you were to put that into real world perspective, like most normal individuals would not necessarily come in contact with magic on a day-to-day basis. So to take that normal hero and bring him into a bigger world, like you're going to see him going, I know that there's magic, but I've never actually seen magic, to all of a sudden she's thrust into a world where magic is actually being used. So that makes sense.
I think your mic is going a little weird, Jamie.
Let's fix it.
Aha.
Yeah, I mean, you have to raise the stakes over time, if for no other reason than it's just good marketing. So,
right. I mean, if you've done everything in book 1 or one, like, I mean, I'm 800,000, 900,000 words into this series, and there's several times where I call Rhett and I go, I don't know what to do, man. Like, I know what I want to do, but this character's already done something similar, so we need something else. It gets harder and harder as you go.
Yeah, this is a series I talked about with Walt. I don't know if you guys have heard of this. It's fantasy from, I want to say, the 70s, The Doomfarers of Cormon by Brian Daley. It's sort of a take on John Carter of Mars, except John Carter is a Vietnam vet, fresh back, and through magical hijinks, he winds up in a fantasy world that's having a revolution. They need a hero, and he finds a way to go back. At one point, they have to go to hell and bring back a friend who's been taken by a demon. He goes back,
like you do,
for sure,
and gets his buddies in the army to come back with their APC, and they storm. It's like a glorious side of the van art kind of battle between these demons and these army grunts with M16s.
That's just cheating.
Yeah, it is. But it's fun cheating. But I don't know. I've been waiting for someone to revive this or buy the rights or make a game out of it, but it seems to have kind of faded into the mist. But yeah, it was a fun book.
Do you guys remember this one? Have you ever read this one?
1 second. Let me stop my share and pick up yours. I have not, no.
So this is a similar kind of a story. It's a portal fantasy where a guy, I believe if I'm not mistaken, it's been a long time since I read it, but he goes into his backyard and discovers this portal into another another realm. And
right in the shed.
And for, R.A. Salvatore did a great job with it. Of course, I think he always does a great job. But, it was kind of like that. And Terry Brooks had Lost Kingdom Magic Kingdom for Sale. Another one of those great Portal fantasies from that period of time.
Well, and of course, there's the D&D cartoon.
Yeah.
There's the gate in the roller coaster.
Yep. That was one of the first lit RPG stories right there, and nobody knew about it. They just didn't know. I had no idea what they were doing.
Still breaking barriers.
That's right.
They really need to finish up that storyline at some point, right?
They did with that car commercial.
They came home and got a sweet Kia sponsorship.
Absolutely. So what do you guys, where do you guys want to see, what do you want to see appear in fantasy next? I mean, we've had the Grimdark. You have things like Dragon Age, where, it was a real dark take on like the zombie trope. Yeah, there it is. What would you guys like to see? What would you guys like to see happen in fantasy? I mean, is there any like trope that hasn't been touched yet that you'd like to see played with, other than car commercials?
I think the future of fantasy is all car commercials and other sponsorships.
I'm done with Grimdark to a degree, for me at least. There's a certain point at which I think I've had enough. And that's where I'm at right now. And I don't know that I love the black and white heroes versus villains kind of thing either. But I really do like, of course, that's why I'm working on that RPG. I like the concept of the post-apocalyptic fantasy where it's there's a lot of PA stuff out there with guys with guns and survival type of stuff, but there's very few that are done in such a way that we, as fantasy lovers, like I want to see the magic and what would magic look like against a horde of zombies that are being controlled by an all-powerful necromancer. I'd love to see that happen as a genre, like post-apocalyptic fantasy. Give me that. I'll read it all day long.
Now, have you seen a friend of ours who has been on the podcast a couple times, and I apologize about the cat looking into my nose. Have you guys have you seen Rob Schwalb's Shadow of the Demon Lord?
Mm-mm.
So it's basically the good guys lose and the demons infest the world. The book was, I don't know if I can reach it. Hold on, I can grab it. The book is gorgeous. It's just a fantastic, amazing book. But the magic system in this is just wicked. I mean, they have like, and you could just tell he was pretty much done with. He was pretty much done with what do you call it? With looking at just standard fantasy and having fantasy. Let me get some of this artwork is just amazing. He was pretty much done with having just standard fantasy of, I cast magic missile and it does this and amazing. Instead he went for there's a spell in this book where you can literally force an opponent to shit himself to death.
Nice.
I mean, it's just but it was such a neat take because it was, you've lost, but is that the end of the tale? Because now all of these demon princes basically have divided up the world into principalities, and each principality has its own unique kind of take on what like you have, in Lord of the Rings, you have Mordor, you have Rivendell. So you have these areas that have their own unique characteristics, and based on like the demons that infest each area, those areas have their own characteristics and stuff like that. So I mean, that was a neat way to do it. Have that epic fantasy that ends epically by everybody losing, and now they have to, where do we fit in here? But
that's not what you're doing, Chuck.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm doing it on a much smaller scale, but yeah, I mean, I'm starting after the good guys have quote unquote won. Yeah.
How about you guys? How about Chuck and Mike? What would you like to see in fantasy that you don't think you've seen before?
I'll defer to Chuck since he's the creative genius in this conversation.
Thank you. I wish to be referred to as creative genius at all times.
Grandpa creative genius. I like it. I like that. That's good.
Yes.
I'm okay with that. It's not for me. It's not so much something I've never seen before, but I would like to see more actual sword and sorcery. Sword and sorcery is the genre. Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser, Conan, that I grew up on, and it seems to have gone away. So I would like to see more. And I guess the closest thing we have to that is that the Thieves' World books are still around. I think they're still kicking out new ones of those every now and then.
Really?
So,
After all this time, okay. Thought they'd gone away.
Hopes to not go too political with this. I think the political landscape that we're in right now, stuff like Sword of Sorcery are really, really difficult because nobody wants to admit that anyone's good and anyone's evil. And I see it a lot in reviews on Amazon and Audible where, people just get torn to shreds because you have decided my own books, I have the one true God in mind. And they're like, well, why the hell is he the one true God and it's like, at some point I'm going, y'all calm down. Just relax and enjoy the story. Don't read so much into it. Okay, they live in sand. They're not Muslims. Yeah. They just, come on. That's where we're at, man. Nobody can write anything without it becoming, political to some degree.
Well, that's like where, not to go into a different kind of nerdery, but modern literary criticism has a hard time with any book that has an anonymous author, because what they want to do is find out all the biographical detail about the author that they can. Yep. And view the work through that lens as though that's a legitimate way to view a work of art. And so if they don't know anything about the writer or the artist, they're confused and bereft and annoyed.
People have trouble separating the author from the people that the author writes. And one of my favorite ways to troll is to go on Goodreads and just go to Orson Scott Card's page. And I love asking, I'll see these people, they're like, Orson Scott Card is a gay hater, blah, blah. He go into this whole thing. And I just love going, what'd you think of the book?
Yeah.
What about the book that you just reviewed and gave a 1-star and didn't actually even read the book that you 1-starred? What about that book?
Yeah.
I think sometimes interaction with fans can, I don't know, it can warp the output. You see it more on TV, oh Christ, the guy who did The Sopranos, he was famous for going online and talking to people in the forums. And there was one great episode. It was a bottle episode where two of Tony Soprano's hitmen take a Russian mafioso out to the Pine Barrens in Jersey, and they're going to whack him. Well, it turns out that Russian guy, he's former Spetsnaz, and he gets away from him and runs away. And so they spend the rest of the episode almost freezing to death in the Pine Barrens, and it's a bottle episode, character development, whatever. And it's like the biggest, unresolved thing. And apparently they actually started to film an episode where the Russian guy comes back because you're waiting for it. And he saw some comments online from some guys criticizing it, and he said, fuck it, we're not going to do it. And I almost wonder if that's why the ending of the show was so unsatisfying, is because he didn't, fuck those guys. You can have the ending you want, figure it out.
Well, Twitter ruined art. Let's just be honest. Twitter has destroyed artists' ability to create anything without getting instantaneous feedback about how horrible it was.
Twitter kind of depresses me. I just go on there to pimp the podcast. Hey, Twitter. And Dan Harmon left Twitter, and I like his output, but he's done some crazy stuff personally. But I guess that's the point of Twitter, right? All of a sudden I know that he harassed somebody on the set of Community, 10 years ago.
Right.
But I was happier without it. And there's so many stupid controversies, and I don't know. I'm trying to figure out how to do social media less. But I sometimes wonder if you're not better just putting yourself in a bubble when you're creating. Of course, I'm lucky that I don't actually have fans who get pissed off about shit. So, that's the luxury of creating an anonymity. Thanks for lighting the mood there, James. I appreciate it. He's doing my greatest podcast there. Hey, one thing I've seen, and Chuck, maybe you would like this. I don't know if you'd call it straight sword and sorcery, but maybe I pimped this on the show with you before. It's this book I've been reading called Reaver, and I can pull up on Comixology, Master the Magic of Technology. It's literally Image Comics from Skybound. It's literally Dirty Dozen in a fantasy world.
Let's not forget about another comic that you've pimped before too, Realm.
Oh my God, Realm is so good. Oh, you guys were talking about differences in fantasy. Realm is basically, and I never explained it, but it's the modern world, the post-apocalypse. But the apocalypse was dragons and orcs and shit showed up, and it takes kind of a very gritty Walking Dead kind of, how are we going to survive? And these are, the lead character is sort of I don't want to say a bounty hunter, but he ferries people across the wastelands for a price. And they're dealing with bugbears and owlbears and all that kind of stuff. But
does he have a cute green baby sidekick? Because otherwise, I'm not interested.
He does not. No.
I have very specific needs when it comes to bounty hunting stories that I never knew I needed until about 6 weeks ago.
Skybound did a book imprint with Atria, I think, and they're doing novels now. And Luna Missile Crisis, which is the one that I showed you guys, we tried hard to get them to pick that up.
Really?
Main reason being, and I'm going to be real brutally honest, I want to write an Invincible novel more than anything on the planet. Invincible to me was the greatest comic book story ever told, and
it got really dark toward the end.
I know, man, and I miss it, and my heart hurts every time I think about it.
It still exists, dude. Just go read it again from issue number 1.
You do what?
I said it still exists. Just go read it again.
Yeah, just start it over. I know.
Start with issue 1. I do that sometimes.
I almost quit at the beginning of that series because it was such a Justice League ripoff purposely, and I didn't, who knew that it was on purpose, and then finally we got through that. Saga was another one, man. Saga is such an amazing series. Image has put out just tremendous material in the wake of Marvel and DC just putting out trash. So go Invincible. I mean, go Image. Good work, folks.
I really dug Saga, but I kind of like the way I read that one Harry Potter book, and I'm good. I'm ready for this to be done. I'm ready for Saga to wrap up in a satisfying manner.
That's fair.
Yeah, I don't care how they do it. I've been along for the ride, and I've been good for this whole time. But after this hiatus, I'm ready for it to just, hey, here's a button on it. Story's done.
Well, that was the issue I had with Marvel and DC, and I quit collecting those about 2 years ago because you always got to like issue 25 and they're like, let's start over. And there was never good resolution. If there was any resolution at all, it was never good resolution. At least Invincible is, I keep saying Invincible. I'm sorry. I'm so stuck on the most wonderful comic ever. At least Image tends to do 130 releases and then says, okay, we're done with it. And so I think Saga will probably get a conclusion at some point.
Oh yeah, it's like Sex Criminals. They'll finish it someday. You just you don't know how. So, but if you're not reading Sex Criminals, that's a good book, but it's completely unrelated to the subject of this podcast. So, and I would do a Sex Criminals focused podcast, but I don't want the FBI paying that much attention to me. So,
hey, you can't be a writer without the FBI paying attention to you. So
yeah, that's true.
If they ever looked at my history, they would just think I am a mass murdering pedophiliac, necrophiliac. I mean, just crazy nonsense. I once asked Google, what do boobs feel like 2 days after death? And I'm going, anyone who reads this, I don't know what they're going to think.
I actually had a game night a couple years ago, and one of my, we're playing Sentinels Multiverse or whatever. A buddy of mine brings his current girlfriend who works in the Denver morgue. And the most interesting stories she had weren't related to cadavers, although she had those. The city of Denver and most other cities don't give your loved ones that body back for free. They process it. There's some things done, and they want a little bit of money before you can get Grandpa back or whatever. If you die on the subway or whatever. Well,
Grandpa's right there, man. Right there. Don't talk about him like he's not here.
Oh
Chuck,
my God!
I'm sorry, Chuck.
He's gonna take out a hit on us.
I'm not going to the home.
So, what she did some of the, body prep and some of the working with that, but it kind of fell to her. She wound up talking to a lot of, speaking of crowdfunding. All right, you guys want Uncle Bob back? Go to GoFundMe. Maybe have a potluck in the neighborhood. Maybe have a garage sale. See what you can do. And
Grandpa, I need $75.
That always struck me as wow. That could be a really interesting hook for a story. Maybe not a fantasy story, although I don't know. That could be. You gotta resurrect Grandpa. You need to get those 75 diamonds somehow. So here's a heist. So
that's just strange.
Yeah, sorry. All right, hey, to wrap things up with a nice button, let's talk about what everybody's doing real fast. Chuck Rice is leading the successfully funded Kickstarter for ... City of Solstice, low magic urban fantasy. You can check it out right now on Kickstarter. It's running for 19 more days, successfully funded, and you are less than 200 away from your next stretch goal, which is
Jacob Blackman art.
We should have had Jacob on. Yeah, $1,600 more art from Jacob.
Yeah.
Then after 1,600, we don't have another stretch goal. Mysterious question marks are mysterious. So,
right.
And hey, you have 6 of these left for the $100 creator level. Get everything in the DM tier. Plus, work with Chuck to create a new resident of Solstice. We'll have a back and forth to make it fit within the setting, but other than that, let your creativity run wild. So you can still jump on that. And let me stop.
Everyone should get one. And by everyone, I mean 6 more people, because that's all there are.
Chuck, can I get one of those just to be a pain in your ass?
Give me $100. Yes.
How about it, Jamie? What are you working on?
We are finishing up book 6 of the Buried Goddess Saga and planning our next series, which is a sci-fi trilogy called The Bionic Supremacy.
Nice.
And so I'm super, super excited about that. Man, I've been writing the same series for nigh on 2 years, and I love it, and I love all of our wonderful fans and all of that, but it gets to a point where you're like, can I write something new now? So if you are a fantasy reader, we've got books 1 through 3 is actually available. I believe it's $2.99 for the entire first 3 books as the Red Star trilogy. And then if you're an audio fan, man, it's narrated by award-winning Hall of Famer Luke Daniels. And, that series has about 3,000 star ratings, and it's been absolutely beloved by fans. So, I'm just so thrilled with the audio on there. So go get it. Love it. Enjoy it. If you hate it, please don't tell everybody you hated it. Just don't tell it. Just move on. Just move on.
Let everyone know. If you hate it, just keep that shit to yourself. Yeah.
There's lots of content out there. All right, guys. It's been a pleasure talking to you. And to our listeners, we'll catch you next time on the Banff Podcast. And this is the